first open day, and we had quite a good response from people. And then about a year ago we had another open day, which was following the non-listing, the decision to not list this place on the Heritage Register in the Northern Territory, which we thought was a big mistake. The result of that open day, when 500 to 600 people turned up with very limited advertising, I think proved to the Heritage Minister that this place was worth preserving.
Do you think these were people who knew about Pitchi Richi, or were they just curious about it?
No, Pitchi Richi has for many years now just virtually been mothballed. It's surrounded by a big high fence, and I know myself for years, for 10 years back, I was always looking into this area and saying, I wonder what's in there, I wonder what's in there. And I think a lot of people in town are still at that point where they don't know what's in here. It just intrigues them to think about what could be behind the Pitchi Richi gates. What is Pitchi Richi?
There's more than one level to the place, isn't there?
There are. We've identified maybe 3 distinct levels to this site. The first phase was when Charles Chapman retired, or supposedly retired, and came to live in Alice Springs from the granites mine where he made most of his money, and he started to invest in various entrepreneurial enterprises in Alice Springs, such as the Advocate was set up by Charles Chapman. He also built the first swimming pool in town. He was quite a mover and shaker, and he had the money to be able to do these things. All that's left of his work, his sort of legacy, is the Pearly Gates, which was his house, which is behind us. His 2-story house, which he built when he retired in Alice Springs. That's one level. The first level is that very early period from the mid-40s to about the mid-50s. The second phase begins with Leo Corbett. Now, Leo Corbett worked for Charles Chapman, and when Charles Chapman died, Leo Corbett inherited the lease here, and he decided to set up the Pitchi Richi Sanctuary. Now, Leo Corbett was very important as a very early conservationist here in Central Australia, and one of the best stories about him is how he saved the gap, Heavy Tree Gap, the most iconic sort of entrance into any town in Australia possibly.
Leo saved the gap. Not many people realise you can still see the scar of where the quarry began, and I'm not sure it was I think there were some government people involved, and because of that, because he stopped them blowing up the gap for road metal, he made a lot of enemies. Nobody in the 50s worried about conserving. You just used it all up, didn't you? And of course the town stopped at the gap, so there was nothing beyond it. So Leo pegged a gold mine. So that's Corbett's gold mine. And he was taken to court. He had a frightful sense of humour. So when he was asked what his assets were, he said he had a wheelbarrow and a pair of bow-yangs. I don't know how the court reacted, but he had a terrible sense of humour.
He wanted this place to be a sanctuary, and he wanted to build it up and leave it for the people. In fact, it was one of his very strong aims to leave this to the people of Alice Springs and Central Australia. It was set up as a sanctuary with the idea of helping the birds survive drought.
The other great story is about the drought, the severe drought which occurred in the early 60s. Leo would go to the bakery and sweep up crumbs and take out food, breadcrumbs, to where he knew birds or where there might have been some water. He used to take that out to the birds, and so he thought maybe there'd be a little old lady in a garret somewhere who'd send him a box of seed and he could help to feed the birds. So apparently he wrote to newspapers around the countryside, just most capital cities I assume, just stating that it was very bad drought and the birds were suffering. If anybody felt like sending a packet of seed, he'd be grateful. Well, apparently the story goes, so much seed came that they had a mouse plague at the post office. And there is a delightful cartoon that I have amongst the collection from the Adelaide Advertiser of birds on their back, sort of crying for help. They're absolutely stuffed in a plane coming, dropping packets of bird seed. But that was the response that he got from people who wanted to help save the birds.